The show that goes there. This is the Shaggy Jenkins Show on the Pacifica Radio Network.
It's the Shaggy Jenkins Show on the Pacifica Radio Network. Welcome to it. Boy, do we have a lot to cover today, including racist voter problems. Yeah, we've got some of those. Faux national emergencies. Yeah, we got some of that too. Plus, we'll end up on the miseducation of the state of Texas. It's all in the most adventurous show you can get in political radio. Before we get to all of the stuff that we have to come, I should probably make some brief introductions. Hi, my name is your host. No, my name is Shaggy. I am your host, and I can be found at my website, shaggyjenkins.com, or wherever fine social media is served at Shaggy Live. The guy joining me today had to fill in for Chris last week, and boy, is his brain tired. Please welcome from West Texas, the very own educator, former politician, and all-around political good guy, Drew Landry.
Hey, good to be here. Always good to join you.
Yeah, I like how you're like, boy, I got to bring my energy level up. Shaggy is on a different level today. I don't want to say that I've been working out and drinking a lot of energy drinks, but I've been working out and drinking a lot of energy drinks.
Well, hey, it's looking out great for you, Shaggy. Keep up the hard work. But I always want to tell you this. This is your energy level. This is where I am when we start. So I always got to creep up to get up there so that we can max out and just got to get up there. Come on. So.
Yeah. Well, I keep trying to explain to people that there is the tale of the two Souths. Now, if you're referring to the Southern Reformatory language family or the Southern accent, that actually has about 14 to 15 different regions between Texas and North Carolina. But when we talk about the South, we got to talk about the differences of the two Souths, okay? I am from what is called colonial South in North Carolina. It's a little bit different than what we would like to call frontier South, which is more Texas. The expansionist southern frontiers, pioneers, the go-it-alone types. No, that was a little too passé for us East Coast Southerners. But one of the parallels that's kind of been running right between those two borders that I mentioned, Carolina and Texas, is voter ID laws. Now, Drew, walk us through what a voter ID law actually is.
Okay. Very good question. Very good starting point. A voter ID law is instituted by a state, and it tells voters that in order for them to cast a ballot, they must show some form of photo identification that matches them with the said person who they are claiming to be when they go vote, so that there's a match. And the idea behind this, the rationale, is to fight this thing called voter fraud. And this has been a fight now in a lot of state legislatures for the past 7, 8, 10 years or so. I mean, you could possibly even take it back further than 10 years. But, look, there's been an ongoing argument by those who have instituted this, because we really saw this come at like a big point in 2011, which were the results of the 2010 midterm elections, where the Republicans gained a great vast majority in that midterm election, not only in Congress, but also in state legislatures. And this is what we often call the big red wave of 2010. And so they took over these majorities in a lot of states, especially in southern states, and they wanted to implement a more conservative ideas and philosophy and policies in those states. And one of the things that they wanted to achieve was these voter ID laws, because they felt that there were a whole bunch of people who claimed to be people and who were voting, and yet they were kind of made up. And so, well, I shouldn't say kind of. In their own minds, they were saying that these were made up people, and they were, claiming to be other people, and there was no way to ever kind of really regulate who's doing what. So what?
Oh, hang on a sec. We got a brief interruption in your signal there.
The whole idea of...
Yeah, just start over with the whole idea of the voter registration laws, because the thing is it kind of just jumped your connection stopped there. But this is the thing, when we talk about these laws, in principle, what you just said is important, because you said it's to make sure that the people that go to the polls are the people that they claim to be. Now, This is where I'm kind of glad that we had this interruption, because you brought up a fascinating tale of how the GOP won the second term George W. Bush midterms. And this is one of the interesting things that happened around that time. If you were watching C-SPAN, okay, I know it's sexy television, let me tell you. But boy. But the thing is like, I'm sorry, C-SPAN, everybody. The thing is that C-SPAN does get into the very non-sexy side of policymakers. And in 2011, right ahead of the 2012 elections, Karl Rove was on C-SPAN talking about how the Southern Initiative, almost like a Nixonian motion that the GOP was undergoing, was to suppress minority votes. And as such, Karl Rove was saying in 2011, and then later in 2013, our greatest accomplishment was suppressing minority communities by 3% at the polls. Now, when you use a word like suppression, this isn't just politics as usual, is it, Drew?
No, it isn't, and I'm glad you mentioned this, because that's where I was going, but before the connection went kind of weird on us, is that, look, the big part of those who have trouble getting an ID are those who are ethnic or racial minorities, and they are more likely to support Democrats than they are Republicans. And so they may not have an ID, and they would have to go get one, and it would cost about $10, $15, maybe even $20 to go get one. Now, in the state of Texas, what happens here is that if you have a birth certificate and you need to go get a voter card or a voter ID, you can obtain that for free. The problem is that there's many people who have lived here for a long time and may not have their birth certificate, and they have to go get it, reprinted or something along those lines, and that would actually cost more money. So the argument being made on behalf of those who don't have an ID is that this is what's called a poll tax, which is in direct violation of the 24th Amendment to the Constitution. And this was actually brought to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, nah, this is okay. So, it's just really, really frustrating. But what you were mentioning there is the suppression of voters, and that's exactly what we have seen with these new voter ID laws, because there's an interesting movement taking place in states like Florida and then in states like Texas, and you're seeing a growing Latino population, and they're becoming 18, and they're becoming interested in politics, and they want to vote. And you do these types of voter ID things. This is going to be a big suppression on the Latino vote, because I don't know how it is in many other states, but I can speak to how it is in Texas. I don't know, I went through driver's education through my school. That's not part of the curriculum in Texas, is that you actually have to go to a private business and get your driver's license and do all that sort of thing. Your driver's license is your number one, well, I shouldn't say number one, it's the most common form of identification. So if you wait until you're 18 to go get a driver's license or something along those lines, it's you're just curtailing a process that should be done quite sooner than what's happening.
Well, can I just interrupt you there? Because as long as we're talking about how to obtain IDs, this has traditionally also been instituted in such a way that disenfranchises minority communities. Okay, so you talked about the Latino community. Let's talk about the black community of the United States, because when we talk about black communities, typically having to go down to a county courthouse and be harassed by a bunch of deputies and, whoever's just kind of milling around isn't the most appealing way that you could spend your afternoon. And here's the thing. These places, these governmental buildings, are usually in hard-to-access places. In other words, you need a car to get there.
That's right.
So, go for it.
Oh, well, yeah, you're exactly right. They're not exactly within walking distance, especially if they're in, rural areas and you're trying to get to your county courthouse or whatever the case may be, and you live in, Podunk, Texas or Podunk, Virginia. It's going to take a while for you to walk or ride your bike. So, and public transit may not be available. So it's going to be very difficult to get there during business hours or any other thing. So again, this is, a very long history here of suppressing the African-American vote, because there's been no other race has been this suppressed as they have when it comes to this fundamental right that is a constitutional amendment to them and later to women. I'm talking about the 15th Amendment and then later the 19th Amendment, where it's like, we'll say that you can vote, but we're going to make it really, really hard for you to really do it. And this is what's been happening. I mean, we had to pass a Voter Rights Act in 1965, just to make sure that it's okay and to get rid of all the mores and the de jure laws of those states and of these black codes that were just dominating the frontier South and the colonial South.
Yeah, because when we're talking about colonial South, North Carolina recently found itself back in federal court again, and this time, isn't it funny that every time we talk about the states of Texas and North Carolina, we're all like, they're back in court again.
Here we go again.
Right. It's like the uncle that always shows up at the reunions and you're always surprised that they're out on bail.
I was going to say sober, but yeah, that works too.
That too. It could be a condition of their bond. But the thing is that, North Carolina did get a little drunk with power not too long ago and instituted what was called surgically precise institutionalized disenfranchisement of the African American community. In other words, they gerrymandered the hell out of their districts in order to disenfranchise black communities. Now, their new voter ID law that they were so proud of, and let's not forget, the North Carolina voter ID law was mimicked by a couple of different representatives in Texas trying to get it institutionalized there. But the voter ID law in North Carolina has been struck down as, guess what, Drew? Unconstitutional. Surprises.
Yeah. Not surprised at all. It's just scratch your head here because it's incredibly odd that once you get told no, you try again in a different way to bring about a voter ID law. I mean, especially since North Carolina has been in the news not just for this, but also for that contested House seat that we talked about some shows ago, before January. As to how, what the heck is going to happen. Now they're going to have a revote or a second election or whatever the technical term is. And if, it's a good thing that this was brought to court before this, this particular election came into light or was, going to happen. So that, so what I'm getting at here is that, there'll be under the old law and not this new, voter ID law that the court struck down. So that's good for the Democrat. That's not, the Republicans are, just kind of kicking the dirt going, well, how many more ways can I try to win without actually, fair and square winning?
Yeah, and this is the thing about the North Carolina story, because it will have repercussions that ripple all throughout the South. You had mentioned Florida. I should also throw in there Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma, and I believe Louisiana and Kansas. Did I miss anybody that is in these kind of weird voter law things right now?
I think you're I think you got them. Yeah.
Yeah, trust me. I had to like practice that whole like list of states there, like the Animaniacs. Arkansas is racist, and so is Louisiana. Florida is a little too south than North Carolina. Texas, they'll disenfranchise you. You know, Virginia, West Virginia too. You know,
Hello, nurse.
Hello, racial voter suppression. Because here's the thing. North Carolina's law, now that it's being struck down as unconstitutional, could have effects through all those other states that we just merrily sang through, because in certain districts and in certain counties, these are the exact type of laws that they have set up for the express purpose of keeping power out of the minority communities. Now, this is the thing that really gets you about the electoral process here in the United States. Drew, when it comes to the processes of districting and voter laws, will we ever have a level playing field?
You know, that's a great question. It's one that I often struggle with just as an academic, because, you know, there's calls to getting rid of gerrymandering and it being through these unelected boards and commissions that would redraw these maps. Okay? I want your audience to understand something, and this is what I tell my students every single semester, is that politicians don't want a fair fight. They don't want a fair fight. And when they're making the rules, they want to win by 40, 50, 60 points. And they want to make that as easy as possible. They don't like the idea of having to make their case constantly and every 2 years, so that voters can get an idea as to, you know, what they voted on, you know, what they've been doing, how's their constituent outreach been going. They don't want to do that. They want to just simply raise as little as money as possible and add to the war chest that's incredibly high through PACs and other types of money, and they just want to use a couple of ads that they can put on the TV and put on the radio and just win by 30, 40, 50 points. That's what politicians want, and this is true for both parties. But this is not how democracy was envisioned by the framers of the Constitution or the founders. Now, I don't want to get it too much into that, because that's a whole rabbit hole discussion there.
Yeah.
But
easy, Alice, easy.
But one thing that I need to mention here is that, you know, Iowa is doing something, and Arizona has done it, and so has California, where they have these unelected boards and commissions that will redraw these maps. Not the politicians, okay, and not any type of people, and not even the political parties. So you have these unelected boards and commissions to really, redraw these things and try to make as a competitive district as much as they can, so that people's voices are being heard. Now, a good question to ask here is, you know, how do you get on this unelected board and or commission to do this? Well, you'd have, in my guess, you'd have to be appointed. And who would you have to be appointed by? Probably by someone who was elected. And so, and it kind of circumvents and comes back to what this whole issue here. But what we found is that, so far the Iowa method is, there hasn't been a whole lot of complaints from anyone saying, look, this is a terrible thing. So far it's been working out, and it could serve as a model that other states want to do, but the problem again exists with the elected officials in those state legislatures. Because again, they don't want a competitive election.
Yeah, can I bring that up? Because as long as we're talking about we need to do a little bit of academic history digging, and I'll try to make this as quick as possible, because they actually started to exist in the 1970s. Now, I had mentioned part of this as the second, Trump's movement here as the second part of what was called the Southern Strategy. And when Nixon was going for his re-election, he was the first person to establish, and we later found out how desperate he was for this to happen through the Watergate scandal. He was the first one to establish that he needed, not wanted, needed, in order for his policies to go forward, he needed to win by a margin of 30 to 40%. Now, you remember that was a huge part of the Southern strategy. This is where he he sent Spiro Agnew to give the address at the dedication of Stone Mountain. You know, the one that basically celebrates the leadership of the Ku Klux Klan.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, good one there, Spiro. Good one. But the thing is through this Southern policy, the Republican Party started to take in, and I'm going to call this something that they've depended on since the 1970s. And the reason that policies like Texas and North Carolina are the way they are, Nixon basically established the south of the Mason-Dixon line great white vote mystique, did he not?
You know, he often referred to that as the silent majority, and that's one thing that he was always pining for was, you know, to get this, this used to be this solidly blue area, and he was able to convert it into what is now a solidly red area, and he deserves credit for that. So no question whatsoever, yes.
Yeah, and I mean, as long as we're talking about that great white vote, over the years, more and more GOP, especially in states like North Carolina, where I was born and raised, and we've seen it in Texas a lot, even on national news, and you living there, wouldn't you say fair share?
Yeah.
Fair share. Okay. Yeah. As long as we're talking about voter suppression laws, voter ID laws and stuff, the aftermath of 9/11 sent the GOP into a voter ID frenzy. Remember all of the people that came forward, Republicans, in both of those two states that said, we need to keep the terrorists from voting. And this was before Russia. This was before the big voter fraud thing that Trump made up a whole electoral panel for. I mean, this was before all of it. The GOP had already tried to center in on this message of we need to keep certain people, they don't look like you white folks, from the polls. Am I right?
Yes, that's exactly what the idea was. And if you recall the 2006 midterm when the Democrats took over Congress, one of the things that the Republicans were saying in that campaign is, well, if you vote for a Democrat, you're voting for the terrorists, and they're going to open up borders, and you'll walk down the street and you'll run into you'll bump into an illegal immigrant, and then that person will just blow up something in your neighborhood, and then that's what democratic power is. And that's the kind of rhetoric that you can expect from them.
Yeah, because, I mean, I know how you... By the way, Drew, amazing restraint on the language that you wanted to use on an FCC radio station. People listening to us on the radio can't make out your mouth motions, but I saw where you were going, Ann. Good stop. And I mean, it is frustrating when we talk about these voter laws. And I understand everybody, no matter what side of the political aisle, is frustrated on it. But the thing is North Carolina now getting their voter ID law struck down, and that's setting a precedent that could ripple through other states. Here's the thing. How are the Republicans going to cheat next? Do you have an idea?
Nothing comes to mind, but here's where it is with me. I'm not surprised by anything. So they'll come up with something. They came up with the voter ID. They instituted this whole aspect of language, trying to disguise what they meant by using other things. So, I'm not really sure where you're going, but I'm not going to be surprised by it.
Yeah. Well, see, the thing is where I was going is these boards that you were talking about. You see, the GOP will figure out eventually that, okay, since we can't do it through redistricting, and that will probably be handled by third-party organizations and things like that. However, who appoints those organizations and who gets the contract is controlled by whoever is in the state assembly, your House of... do they still have the House of Burgess or the House of Commons? I think it is the House of Commons.
In Virginia?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the House of Burgesses, yeah, as far as I know, yeah.
Yeah, boy, very, very good update on staying with the modern times in Virginia. What the hell is a Burgess anyway?
It's, well, we know it's not a birder, so, which is what the president had with Clemson.
Yeah, I was about to say, is this Hamburgesses available in Virginia? But look,
Have one with cheese, please.
oh my God! But in these sort of representative houses, what they're going to do is they're going to move to control the contracts of who gets appointed to doing what electoral work. So eventually, we're basically going to have to decide on whether or not humans can be trusted with democracy. And Drew, what do you think the answer is going to be?
We're going to be right back here talking about this whole thing yet again, and I just want your audience to understand this is that the idea behind redistricting is a very pure aspect because the legislative maps need to adapt with the population changes that go on in the state. That very much makes sense. If 500,000 people moved from Texas to Hawaii, there would need to be a change in the way that Hawaii has done its legislative maps. I mean, there'd have to be a whole new type of drawing going on there, and maybe more traffic problems too. But other than that, these very small problems that I know Shaggy would be able to just really divert from.
Okay, all right. But first off, because we got a break coming up here. Can we say no more 500,000 haoles move into Hawaii, please? You don't get our food, you don't get our culture, you don't get the multinationalist of it, you don't get anything. Oh, and by the way, aloha is actually a state law in Hawaii. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. Hey, we've got to take a break. When we get back, we're going to talk about faux national emergencies, including ones that would make Texas flee to Hawaii. Please don't do that. Okay, we'll come back with more up next. This is the Shaggy Jenkins Show.
Opiates has taken everything and everyone I've ever loved away from me. Everything. All I did was dance. I was being scouted for a scholarship. I blew my ankle out and I got prescribed pain pills by my doctor. If making my detox public is gonna help somebody, I'm all for it. Is there any medicine that I can have right now? I'm cold sweating really bad. I just wish I would have had a warning.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth.
Warning. Too much consumption of the Shaggy Jenkins Show could result in a higher IQ, a better understanding of the world, and not being called an idiot as much. It's the Shaggy Jenkins Show.
I am, of course, your host,
It's the Shaggy Jenkins Show on the Pacifica Radio Network.
Welcome back to it. I am, of course, your host, Shaggy Jenkins, and you can find me and the first part of this show at a bunch of different places. You can start by looking at our website, shaggyjenkins.com, wherever fine social media is served, at Shaggy Live, or on a lot of popular podcast platforms. Yeah, we're out on those as well. Okay, just look for the Shaggy Jenkins Show. Joining me is a guy that is just really into getting facts straight, because not a lot of people are these days. Please welcome former politician, current educator, Drew Landry. We did that last week, and I put it up as a bonus video. Okay, let's not do that. You're weird, Shaggy. We did that last week, and I put it up as a bonus video, and people were like, "You're weird, Shaggy." Too long ago, our president. But this is something that I want to bring up that is kind of weird, because not too long ago, our president had a very rambling rose garden speech about a national emergency, and I likened his speech to how Bill Hicks, the deceased comedian, used to talk about how mainstream news covered world event. And it's shockingly familiar, Drew. Because this is something Drew should know a lot about Bill Hicks, is Bill Hicks got his comedy career as the Austin Outlaws with other guys like, what was it, Steve Lavoie. There was a lot of the Austin Outlaws. There was that guy, Sam Kinison, Carl LaRoe. Yeah, there was a lot of the Austin Outlaws. But this is one of the things. They were very political. And Bill Hicks used to say that if you ever watch the news and go out into the real world, you'll notice that there's a disconnect. You open up your door, there's crickets. He says, on the news, they're saying death, destruction, AIDS, terror, blah, blah, blah. You open up your door, there's crickets, there's silence. You're like, where is all this stuff happening? And for his sane man comedy dare I say that joke that was written originally for his sane man comedy routine back in 1991. 91-19, you get a little dyslexia, and Donald Trump is trying to say the same thing with a national emergency, isn't he?
I watched that. You hit the nail on the head, man. I had a discussion. I watched and I got lost. And was talking, and I think he had a discussion in his own head. What the heck is he? And was talking out loud. What? And that. So I thought, what the heck is he? I vividly remember. I'm calling in the national emergency. And so so here's one thing that I vividly remember. Is that I'm calling in the national emergency. I could have done it sooner, or I could do it later. I don't have to do it. I'm doing it now. But I can do it. I don't know. I could have done it sooner, or I could do it later. But I'm doing it now. Called an ambulance, or how many other times your listeners? Many times you've called an ambulance, or how many other times your listeners and viewers have called an ambulance? But I don't think they're going right now. Well, this person's having 911 now. I don't have to. A terrible medical thing right now. But I could. I could call 911 now. I don't have to. But I could. I'm going to. That's the emergency line. So to the first responders. And so 911 is that's the emergency line to the first responders for the most bizarre thing. Come on, we shouldn't be surprised. No one does. That was the most bizarre thing I've seen. But we shouldn't be surprised. I mean, I was so mad at myself for being surprised of the unexpected. That's what why are you become the new normal? Why were you so unexpecting of the unexpected? That's what this has become the new normal with President Trump. I want everyone to be just as surprised as what comes out of my mouth. Think this through. I want everyone to be just as surprised as what comes out of my mouth as I am. So I'm just going to say whatever I think. Yeah. No filter. That's what we got. Not even going to try to rehearse it. I'm just going to ad-lib. I mean, this is what and that's what we got. It was this bizarre thing that can be used against him. I mean, this is what needs to be brought up to him. Well, if this is a national emergency, that defeats the whole purpose. Why did you say that you could do it later? Yeah. I was about to say, defeats the whole purpose of an emergency. What do we have scheduled? So there's that. I was about to say, doesn't it kind of remind you of that insurance commercial that says, "What do we have scheduled for Thursday?" Oh, a flood. Yes, a disaster. A flood is. We're going to schedule that for some time in the advance. And the tagline was disasters and emergencies have no schedule, right? That's exactly right. Okay, so, going back to that Bill Hicks joke, and I'm going to update this for people that were in Texas at the time. The president is on the news, and he's going, we have MS-13, we have ISIS, we have Taliban, we have Al-Qaeda, we have terrorists and destruction, we have lesions and lepers and medical conditions, we have rapists and drug dealers and kidnappers, and all of these guys are just running outside your door, and he's like, rabble, 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 and then somebody in Texas goes, oh my God, they throw open the door, and it's like, roll by, what? Where is all this? Like a tumbleweed will roll by. I know how you guys in Texas are. Brad, their neighbor, barbecuing some sort of brisket thing, because I know how you guys in Texas are. You're exactly right about that. You're exactly right. Even those on the border. You're exactly right about that. You're exactly right, because even those on the border, even the ranchers and farmers on the border are going, There is some in that line of business.
This I don't know what you're talking
say,
about.
Yeah, go
ahead. Now there is some
than not, what you're
in that
find
line of
are
business
farmers and ranchers
who say, "Yeah, go ahead."
Now this
But
national
more
emergency
often than
stuff,
not, what you're going to
on my
find
land,
are farmers and ranchers who
think
say,
so.
"I don't. This national emergency stuff, building the wall
this isn't
on my
exactly
land,
a fun moment.
I don't
for
think
them.
so."
So and they're even themselves are
they're-
going. I don't
this
see what
this
you're
isn't
talking
exactly
about.
a fun moment for them.
I don't see it.
So and they're
Because
even
what we
themselves are
often
going.
see,
I
and
don't
this is-
see what you're
this is the
talking about. I
ongoing
don't see it.
about
Because what we often see, and this is the ongoing fact
all the things that the
about
president has
illegal
stated that just
immigration
somehow funnels
is
through,
that all the drugs
they
and
come
all
through
the
legal
things that the
ports of
president
entry.
has stated that just
Okay?
somehow funnels
And
through, they come through legal
illegals,
ports of
as he
entry.
likes to call them,
Okay?
he being the president,
And
are those
these
who came here on a visa
illegals,
and
as
have
he likes to call
overstayed
them,
it.
he being the president,
This
are
is-
those
so
who
those are
came
the
here
two
on a
basic
visa and
things.
have overstayed
Okay?
it.
And
This
and the
is so
president
those are the
doesn't
two
wanna accept
basic
that.
things.
He's
Okay,
he's, equated
and
this
the
national
president
emergency
doesn't
with
want to
national
accept that.
security.
He's
And,
equated
and so
this
far, that's a
national
winning
emergency with
selling
national
point for him.
security,
And it's really tough to
and
get people
and so
to
far that's a
separate the two
winning
things.
selling point
Yeah,
for him,
because to the
and
rest of
and
the
it's really
country,
tough
this
to
is what
get
the
people
immigration
to
crisis
separate the two
actually
things.
looks like in because to the rest of the country, this is what the immigration crisis actually looks like in Texas. Some rancher will go out and he will find some guy named Jose that works on his ranch that has been like a fourth generation citizen of Texas. His family like was in Texas before Texas was a thing, and he'll be like, Jose, have you seen anything weird? And Jose will spit his tobacco because once again,
as they say,
Texas.
take a haughty spit of his chaw.
He will, and as they say, take a haughty spit of his chaw.
And then, when it comes to what about the drugs and stuff and your people
Haven't
bringing
seen a
in,
thing.
he goes, excuse me,
And then
sir,
when
my
it comes to
people?
what about the drugs and stuff and your people
Because
bringing
that's
in,
what's
he goes,
really
excuse me,
happening
sir,
with this
my
whole
people.
rambling speech that Trump got.
Because that's
He's
what's
kind of
really
so
happening
confusing
with
people
this
that
whole
are
rambling
fictitious
speech that
Jose,
Trump
once again,
got.
fourth
He's kind of
generation
so
Texan,
confusing
born and
people
bred,
that
loves his
are
brisket
fictitious
just like
Jose.
everybody
Once
else.
again,
He's
fourth
gonna look
generation
at these
Texan,
guys
born
coming
and
at him
bred,
going,
loves his
"What do
brisket
you
just
mean,
like everybody
you
else.
people?"
He's going to look at these guys coming at him going, "What do you mean, you people?"
able to
really
mixed together.
That's
is
the
that
ongoing
somehow,
thing that the
know,
president has
your-
been
your
able to
Miguel's, your
really
Jose's,
mix together.
your,
Is that somehow your
whoever else
Miguel's,
that has a
your
Latino
Jose's,
name
your
is somehow this
whoever
drug
else that has
smuggling,
a Latino name
raping,
is somehow
thief.
this drug
and
smuggling,
is coming after you.
raping. Thief.
This is
man,
what makes
it is
people
coming
fearful,
after you.
And,
and
I often have
this
to
is
remind
this is
people
what
that
makes
right
people
before the
fearful,
midterm
and
elections,
I
President just
I
suddenly
often
out of
have
nowhere
to
says,
remind people
"There's
that
a
right
caravan
before
coming.
the midterm elections,
caravan coming.
the
There's a
president
caravan
just suddenly
coming."
out of nowhere
And
says,
then after
"There's
the
a caravan
election,
coming.
we
There's a
only
caravan coming. There's a
sporadically hear about
caravan coming."
caravan.
And then
And-
after the election,
I mean,
we only sporadically hear about a caravan.
Now, if this had
And
some sort of election,
I mean, I wonder now
influence in
if
trying
this
to
had
scare
some sort
people
of
to vote for
election
President Trump's party and all the
influence
candidates he
in trying to
endorsed.
scare
I mean,
people to vote
I would like
for President Trump's
anybody
party
to
and all
follow
the candidates he
who follows the
endorsed.
president on
I mean,
Twitter.
I would like for
Whenever he
anybody to
endorses a candidate,
follow
it's always the same
who
three
follows the
things.
president on
Strong
Twitter.
border, loves our military.
Whenever he endorses
for
a candidate,
guns.
it's always the same three
Always,
things.
it's
Strong
some mix
border,
of the
loves
last
our
part, but
military.
It's always strong
Great
border,
for
loves our
guns.
military.
It's always it's some mix
This is
of
where,
the last
this
part,
is
but
the
it's always
problem
strong border,
that
loves our military.
Democrats have that the Republicans don't have is the message.
This is where this is
Everyone
the
wants
problem
a very
that
strong
Democrats
border. Everyone
have
wants a
that the
secure
Republicans
border.
don't have is the
The
messaging.
problem is that
Everyone wants
they
a
just
a very
equate the
strong
problem
border.
to
Everyone wants a
one
secure
Latino.
border. The problem is
And
that
we
they
equate-
just
and,
equate the
I'm
problem
sorry, I
to
just gave
one
myself away here, but
Latino.
Democrats often
And
equate our,
we equate, and
themselves to,
I'm sorry, I just gave
the
myself away here,
president
but
is the
Democrats
problem.
often
And there
equate
is
our
no
equate themselves to
then
no,
then he'll
the
point to
president
some story.
is the
well,
problem.
I just heard
And there
somebody
is no
say, and then there's this
emergency.
thing happening down
But
here
then
where people are
then
shooting,
he'll point to some
and they
story.
were
Well,
Latinos.
I just heard somebody say, and then there's this thing
Yeah, I
happening
know.
down
Once
here where
again, they
people
were
are shooting,
probably born and
and
raised
they were
in
Latinos.
Texas because
And-
riding around and shooting
I know.
guns.
Once again, they were probably born and raised in Texas because
riding around and shooting guns is not Mexican behavior, by the way. That's strictly an American thing. And let's not forget that the West District of Texas, the one that you proudly reside in, as the most per capita population of gun ownership in the United States. It is the most concentrated area of gun ownership. Those gun owners, what color would they happen to be, Drew?
White.
So if I'm looking for trouble, I'm thinking that I'm going to go to the place where all the rednecks are with the guns. That's going to be where I'm going to find the trouble, not in the communities along the border where they're going, if you erect this wall. Here's the thing, because let's go back to our rancher scenario. Our rancher assistant, our head of fields, Jose here, goes, look, you throw that wall up, all of a sudden, I'm going to have significant problems getting my product into the Mexican market. Now, we do have port of entries that we already go through for livestock and other domestic produce and any sort of food-type sales between the United States and Mexico. But in a wall-type situation, now Jose, the ranch hand, is going to have to move his herd maybe dozens, maybe hundreds of miles down the border just to get them into the Mexican market, once again, costing the American farmer money because he's incurred a much higher cost of transportation into a market that, let's just face facts, if they start losing U.S. produce and meat, they've found other countries to get it from.
That particular field is not exactly the only thing that will be affected by that. I mean, that particular field is not exactly the only thing that will be affected by that. I mean, we often forget about the ongoing trade war with China. That's affected a lot of farmers here in my part of the state. And believe it or not, there's a great deal of sorghum farming. There's a great deal of pecan farming. You wouldn't really guess that in West Texas. But this is the cotton patch. This is the oil patch. It's a little bit south of where I live. But those are the two big things people will equate. But the pecan farmers are going, hey, what the heck? I mean, even peanut farmers are. Their prices have no choice but to go up, and that's hurting their sales. And so this is another thing that the American farmer in West Texas would have to jump over, no pun intended. Well, I guess pun is intended because of a wall you have to jump over anyway. So it's just so incredibly frustrating. So this is just another issue here. They don't really care much about that. It's just so incredibly frustrating. National security, but this is they don't really care much about that. The president is talking about national security, and this is what he's dealing with.
But when it comes to Texas and their views of national security, they're like, this wall costs jobs, this wall will cost us money, this wall will isolate our agricultural markets from a rich and supportive country. Over the past, I don't know how many dozens and dozens of years, we've had these great agreements with Mexico. And we're talking not like NAFTA or things like that. We're going way back to when Texas, just as a state, was like, hey man, screw the rest of the country. We got to come up with a deal here. Let's work together. We got stuff. You got stuff.
There's an interesting relationship there.
Let's work together.
It's a bit of an interesting. I mean, there's an interesting relationship there, but that's. But look, I mean, you've got those who actually live on the border, and will tell you that this isn't as bad as what people are saying that it is. Yes, there's gang violence, but there's a lot of gang violence throughout Texas. There's gang violence throughout California. There's in the most remote places. Stop those things. Yes, there's sex trafficking, but look, I don't know what a wall's going to do to stop those things. Without a wall, they're not. Without a national emergency, these are issues that can be solved without a wall and without a national emergency. That several other former government officials have said, no, this isn't a thing. This is a made-up thing that the president has just wanted to do. And this is where we are.
Yeah, because the thing that really kind of gets me about this story is the latest little addition to this about people like Madeleine Albright and John Kerry and other former members of the Intelligence and State Department of the United States, other administrations, both Republican and Democrat. 58 of them have signed a letter of interest to the. Now, I should clear up. When I say letter of interest, this is actually a governmental form of being able to address a public cause. When you write a letter of interest in an official capacity, it's actually entered into the National Archives at the Library of Congress. Okay, so they've registered a letter of interest. 58 former members of the Intelligence and State Departments have said there is, in effect, no national emergency. And here's some of the statistics they brought forward. One of them, illegal immigration from the United States southern border is at a historical 40-year low. 40 years. That's a long time, by the way, ladies and gentlemen.
Opioid crisis in the United
States.
Now, not only that, they're finding that when it comes to the opioid crisis in the United States, the opioids that are supposedly coming through the southern border aren't coming through there at all, and instead are being found in shipments of food and other things, and coming into ports, train stations, and what's this? Airplanes. Oh my God, the thing that doesn't need a wall or even care about a wall, an aeroplane. Imagine that, Drew. So with all of these former intelligence people coming forward and saying, hey,
that means that if
what crisis? And they're doing it in an official capacity. That means that if a member of the House of Representatives or Senate wants to say, look, there is no national crisis, we want to make a vote on this. Oh, by the way, here's an official letter of interest that supports our findings. It actually props up their case when it comes to a legislative kind of a way. So with this letter of interest being signed by 58 members of both Republican and Democratic administration. How likely are we to believe a national emergency
point
now?
There that it's an interesting. I mean, this is going to be used, point there that. Counterpoint to what the president has been stating. I mean, this is going to be used, I think, in the lawsuits brought against the president and his so-called national emergency. And so, this ongoing legal battle. This is just another piece in the this ongoing legal battle. Legislative perspective, hopefully, there's other things that can be done here from a legislative perspective. Hopefully, Congress would want to follow up and kind of use this as a source and say this is what we can move this along. But because that wouldn't hold your breath for Congress to do a whole lot. So
because look, as long as we're talking about the national Congress, the Republicans and Mitch McConnell, who is about to face his hardest 18 days ever. Mitch McConnell and everybody that's about to go through the gauntlet of immigration and other stuff are going to kind of have to take a backseat to our next story, because I found this one out of the state of Texas, and I thought, wow, this is fascinating because... Look, let's just go ahead and be honest. When it comes to the Republicans and Democrats in the state of Texas, Democrats have basically taken a more meager kind of approach to things. They're only doing marginal things because they don't want to upset the highly conservative constituency. So most of the time, if you find somebody that's a part of the quote-unquote blue wave in Texas, they're actually a part of a much more centrist wave that's not really aligned to one or two policies, ideologies. Wouldn't you agree?
In several areas. In a lot of areas, yeah. I'd have to agree with that in several areas, yeah.
But this latest move by the Democratic members of the state legislature in Texas is, oh my God, a checkmate moment. Okay, well, it's not so much a checkmate moment, but it is really a strategic chess move. I'm talking about them coming forward with a bill that says, hey, look, you remember all that stuff we took took out of education.
What is this story?
No.
Democrats
We're going to
coming
put it
forward
back
and
in
saying,
and increase it. Drew, what is this story with Democrats coming forward and saying we're going to increase, I think it was by $13.5 million spending on public education in Texas?
I know because that's
this was a big thing in the 2018 election, and I know because that's what I also ran on too. So this was a big deal. Public education has been lacking since 2011. The big Tea Party win in 2010, and when they came into 2011, they actually deducted all of the state, everything by the state budget in every department by 10%. They cut funding and all of those things. So public education was included in those cuts, and they've been cutting it and cutting it and cutting it. And so the Republicans, who have a 9-seat majority in the Texas House, stated here that we're going to give $7 billion to public ed, and we're going to reduce. We're going to put a cap on property taxes. And then they were going to come out with an education funding bill of their own. So they were going to do. Part one was this property tax cap. Part two was later. Here's an education funding. Well, the Democrats come out and just say, "All right, you want to do this? Well, in Texas we have this poker game. Maybe you've heard of it called Texas Hold'em. Don't know if you ever heard of that. So I'm going to. I love chess, but here's what I think would happen. All right, you just threw your chips on the ground. On the table. Here's I will see that, and I will raise you another exactly what you just gave. I'll raise you 100% of what you just gave me. Public education they've come out with $14 billion here of public education funding, and that's going to go to raises for teachers, and it's going to actually help out the retired teachers funding. And you're going to give a $500 stipend to every teacher so that they can get most of the time, the materials for their classrooms, because most of the time, nearly all the time, teachers spend their own money on their own classrooms, and they don't get reimbursed for it. So I'll see that. This is a big move here. I see what you did. I'll see that. I'll raise you exactly what you just gave me, and see what happens here. But now the reason that they're not coming out with a tax cap bill of their own is that this isn't the sexiest thing to talk about. Married to the idea that if you this isn't the sexiest thing to talk about is property taxes. So just kind of bear with me here. Is that if you increase the funding for public education, that will lower your property taxes because you're increasing the state share and you're lowering the local share. And that's a big part of Texas funding of public ed is through property taxes. So when the state cuts funding for public ed, property taxes go up. So the idea is if they put in money for public ed, the private taxes would go down. And so that's why the Democrats didn't kind of this teeter-totter type of relationship here. And so that's why the Democrats didn't come out with this tax cap thing and said, well, we put a whole bunch of money here. This is what we propose for public ed, and this will lower property taxes. So what say you? It's like they just saw it, raised it, and then just go what?
Over the river.
It is like when you said the whole Texas Hold'em thing. It's like you flipped over the river just to find that there was a bunch of kids there.
The GOP, please bet against
and the Democrats are now telling the GOP, please bet against the river. Go ahead when we're holding the truly significant hand here. Bet against the river. Now,
it's all about the flip.
I know statistically speaking, if you've got a really good hand, the river doesn't matter. It's all about the flip. But sometimes the river can change the way a player will stay in or out of the game. And when we're talking about this whole Texas Hold'em of the Texas education system, this is the Democrats truly being confident on the river, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. This is a big thing that they've talked about for some time. One of the most anti-public education people in all the state of Texas is the lieutenant governor. That's Dan Patrick. He's in charge of the Senate, and he claims he wants to do a $5,000 across-the-board raise for public education teachers, but the money for that hasn't really been specified or how that's going to be done.
The governor, Greg Abbott, says that merit pay
stated that there's
is
a
what
teacher who is in
should
his
be
third
done
year
because he
making almost $100,000 in the Dallas schools.
Stated that there's a
Whenever
teacher
that's come
who's
out
in
to
his
be,
third
that's
year making almost $100,000 in the Dallas schools. Whenever that's come out to be, that's
Democrats have been pretty
false.
consistent on
So
this.
he thinks merit pays the best way to do it, but Democrats have been pretty consistent on this. Is that every teacher, every paraprofessional, like a teacher aide or a librarian, those types, they deserve a raise too. And let's give an across-the-board substantial raise to our teachers. Therefore, we can attract more people to come into this profession, and they can do their jobs better without having a whole lot of economic depravity. So.
We got like 15 seconds left.
So this
has
been their bet.
Yeah,
you're exactly. They are very confident.
We got like 15 seconds left in the show, so I want to give you kind of a yes or no thing. The Democrats clearly have went out into the middle of the desert and thrown a line down in the sand. How likely are the Republicans going to take the bait and cross that line and try to do something else?
They'll take the bait. They'll come up with another line in some way.
Fun. Well, Drew, thanks for checking in with us again this week, and that's for everybody
else.
Thank
you. It's always fun to be with you, Shaggy. I always enjoy it.
Yeah, and that's for everybody else. Please try to take care of yourself and take care of your voting rights, because if you don't know your voting rights, chances are those voting rights weren't written for you. Until next time, love you, meet it, Gate and bye. We're out.